Hello, I'm Bobby Jean Schweitzer. I'm a professor of anesthesiology and critical care and medicine at the University of Chicago, and I'm going to be covering anesthesia for electroconvulsive or ECT therapy, ophthalmologic, and laparoscopic surgeries. Let's talk about laparoscopic surgery. So some general principles. It requires insufflation of the abdominal cavity. Use and the most common gas that's used, and this is used for other kinds of scopes, whether it's thoracoscopy, but we're talking about specifically laparoscopy here, but they use carbon dioxide, which can lead to hypercarbia. And in fact, it almost always leads to hypercarbia. But this is necessary to increase the intra-abdominal pressure, push away the other organs, push away and be able to visualize the surgical field. This tension may interfere with ventilation. In fact, it usually pushes up the diaphragm, and it usually makes it harder to ventilate these patients, and yet we need to ventilate them more because we need to blow off the CO2. It also may decrease venous return, so it doesn't just have implications for ventilation, but also implications for hemodynamics. It can decrease cardiac output and decrease blood pressure if the venous return is impacted significantly enough. So for the positioning also may worsen or improve these two things. So if the patient's in reverse Trendelenburg, for example, this is used for a cholecystectomy surgery where the head is higher than the feet to allow the gallbladder to come down from underneath where it's sitting there at the liver and the costal margin, then that improves ventilation because you get better unloading of the diaphragm and easier to ventilate, but it actually further inhibits venous return and decreases cardiac output and decreases blood pressure because the legs are lower than the rest of the body. Where the positioning for Trendelenburg positioning, which is used for example, a prostatectomy or hysterectomy, makes it harder to ventilate the patient because now you have all the abdominal contents and the diaphragm pushing up, squishing up the lungs, but it actually improves the hemodynamic consequences because you have improved venous return because the legs are high up and supplying intravascular volume. The Trendelenburg position also is problematic because it will increase facial and airway edema. So usually these procedures are done with intratracheal tubes and general anesthesia for exactly that reason, because it can have effects on the airway as well as effects on ventilation. However, if it's simply a pelvic laparoscopic procedure, particularly for like tubal ligation or diagnostic gynecological procedure, these are done not infrequently, and in fact outside the United States quite commonly with supraglottic airways or central neuraxial anesthetics. And there's even been reports of patients undergoing cholecystectomies, laparoscopic cholecystectomies with supraglottic airways. So it's really important to monitor end-tidal CO2 because the end-tidal CO2 generally is going to go up unless you ventilate the patient more, unless you can ventilate the patient more because of the iatrogenic input of CO2 into the abdomen. You want to make sure you decompress the stomach if there's a risk for visceral puncture with the trocar, and it can improve laparoscopic visualization. It's almost always important to do this for upper abdominal laparoscopic procedures, though again, increasingly for prostatectomies, hysterectomies, lower and pelvic procedures, it's not necessary to decompress the stomach with an OG tube. You want to avoid nitrous oxide because it will diffuse in and increase the pressure in the abdomen. There is less post-operative pain with open procedures, and there seems to be a faster rate of recovery with laparoscopic procedures compared to open procedures. So there are some reasons to try to favorably get a patient through a laparoscopic procedure, though intraoperatively the challenges of anesthesia may be greater. Particularly for patients with significant lung disease, for example. However, if you've got a patient with significant lung disease, having an open cholecystectomy significantly increases their risk of post-op pulmonary complications. So you want to sort of balance one risk versus another, the intraoperative risk versus the post-operative risk. So the complications is that you'll have difficulty with ventilation, increased high airway pressures, limited tidal volumes, hypercarbia. You can get subcutaneous air, either from the air diffusing through the ports from the abdomen out into the subcutaneous tissue, or inadvertently if the surgeons put his cannula to inflate the CO2 if he hasn't gotten it all the way into the abdomen, or she hasn't gotten it all the way into the abdomen, and they may be infusing air directly into the subcutaneous tissue. Generally, the subcutaneous tissue looks worse than it actually is. It has sort of a crepitus, kind of like those air bubble things that use for shipping, and you can sort of squish it around. And the patient may think it looks weird, but it usually does not compromise like airways or compromise venous access or anything like that. However, air that's inadvertently gotten into the the mediastinum or into the pleural space can be a problem. First off, the pneumoperitoneum and pneumomediastinum cause increased chest pain, abdominal pain, shoulder pain. It can mimic ischemia or myocardial infarction, and it can impact venous return and limit venous return and decrease cardiac output and blood pressure. Laparoscopic procedures also are associated with a significant risk of post-op nausea and vomiting, so all the other things that apply about doing prophylaxis is important for these procedures. So hypercarbia, the differential diagnosis of hypercarbia can be challenging because there's always a concern is the surgeon inflating too much? Am I not getting rid of it? Or is there something else that's going on like light anesthesia or MH? So at its most basic, the differential of hypercarbia is either there's increased production or decreased elimination. That's the only two basic causes. So if you divide into those two categories, it can help you sort of come to the correct answer. So increased production, the iatrogenic would fall under that. Even though the patient's not inherently producing CO2 themselves, the surgeon is giving them to them. So that's really iatrogenic, but it would fall in the increased production range. So, decreased elimination is you're just not getting rid of it. And so you're not giving out enough tidal volumes, you're not breathing fast enough for the patient, or there's, some kind of a kinked or plugged endotracheal tube, or your ventilator is malfunctioning. Increased production is the light anesthesia, a fever, malignant hyperthermia, all would increase production of CO2 because it increases metabolic rate. So hypoxemia, particularly in regards to laparoscopic surgery, may be secondary to decreased ventilation, or it may be secondary to the hemodynamic effects. Because remember, if you don't have cardiac output to carry oxygen around adequately, then the patient's going to be hypoxemic, and definitely at a tissue level hypoxemic. So the first thing to always worry about is the decreased ventilation, that you're not adequately ventilating the patient. There's increased atelectasis, again from the insufflation, pushing up, causing collapse of the airways, or again, you haven't given adequate ventilation because your ventilator may be set incorrectly. So if you're using pressure-controlled ventilation, which a lot of people now do, remember it's going to be limited at the pressure. It won't guarantee a definitive tidal volume. And because of the increased abdominal pressure sort of pushing back, you may reach those airway pressures and the ventilator, stops insufflating before you reach an adequate tidal volume. So it may be safer to use volume-controlled ventilation or a backup volume control mode. And again, patients with COPD or asthma at increased risk. But remember, don't just think about ventilation and pulmonary issues being the reason for hypoxia. Think about decreased cardiac output. We mentioned it again now. Decreased cardiac output can result in hypotension, and high airway pressures can result in hypotension because of decreased venous return as well. So these can be sort of a vicious cycle, which one leads to the other. Of excess ventilation, decreased venous return, more hypotension, more decreased cardiac output, etc. So a couple of specific surgeries just to highlight some of the issues. A Nissen fundoplication is used to reduce the herniated stomach when you have a hiatal hernia. And then typically there's a repair of the diaphragm. They often wrap the stomach sort of around that area to prevent it going back up in to create more of a bulk there. Typically, the patients are in reverse Trendelenburg. Again, so the head will be higher than the legs to allow the stomach to come down. So it'll be easier to ventilate those patients, but you'll have more challenges with hemodynamics and blood pressure. Always beware that you don't want to leave the temperature probe or an esophageal stethoscope down there, because if they staple across it, then they may require an open resection to remove your probe, and the patient nor the surgeon will be very happy with that. Remember, post-op nausea and vomiting can cause esophageal rupture or gastric rupture in these patients because they've just had some surgery. Abdominal hysterectomy highlights the opposite of what we just talked about as far as positioning goes. These patients are usually in very, very steep Trendelenburg, so you're going to have increased difficulty with ventilation, low tidal volumes, a lot of atelectasis. The patients are at risk for airway, periorbital, head and neck edema. However, you will typically have better blood pressure results because of the venous loading from the legs being up. You may have decreased urine output, both due to positioning as well as the insufflation, so it may be hard to monitor your volume status with urine output. Usually these are done with general anesthesia with an endotracheal tube, both because of the difficulties with ventilation as well as the risk of aspiration of gastric contents coming up, as well as the risk of airway edema. Let's do a question. You have a 66-year-old female with severe GERD for a laparoscopic Nissen fundoplication. She is obese with severe COPD. You're concerned about ventilation intraoperatively. The surgeon reassures you that the positioning will be at an advantage. Which position will she be in for this procedure? A, supine, B, prone, C, reverse Trendelenburg, D, lateral, or E, Trendelenburg. So a laparoscopic Nissen fundoplication. Remember the picture I showed you? Think of where the stomach is. And reverse Trendelenburg. So again, for once the surgeon knew a little bit about anesthesia and ventilation and lung function, and he's right, it should be easier for you to ventilate. Doesn't mean it will be easier overall for you to take care of this patient. Thank you very much for your time.